All right, Genesis 12 today. Actually, just got home from church. The very first thing I do when I get home is I take off my belt and I undo my top button. I'm like, because every day after church, we have a big family get together and plenty of food. Today, there's actually a community chicken fry. Oh, so delicious. So delicious. And my stomach is full. But I haven't been able to make one of these in a while, so let's get to it. Got my notes here, and I got pretty into it the other night. Got through 3 chapters, all the way to Genesis 12 now. So, we are at Abraham's calling, basically. But he's still Abram at this time. He's not Abraham yet. So just start off here. This is the King James Version. Genesis 12, verse 1. Now the Lord had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will shew thee. Now, if you remember in Genesis 11, at the very end it talks about how Terah, Abram's father, takes his household out of the land of Haran. But here, the very next verse in 12, it talks about how God told Abram to take his household. And I made the comment that it wasn't really Terah was more or less kicked out by Nimrod because Abraham had defied the gods and Terah had defied him, and Terah wasn't really a true believer. He just was forced to leave, and he took his household with him. But from that point on, he still had his servants, but for the most part, it was Abram was the head of the household. Terah had his servants that went with them, and he stayed with Abram because Abram offered him, the more people you have together, the better. But for the most part, Abram was now, it was his household. He showed true faith to God. Terah didn't. Terah doesn't really run the household anymore. They give him honor because he's the father in the end of chapter 11, but it's Abram's. And also, it's the city of Ur that they left in the land of Haran. All right, verse 2. And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. So my favorite part of this is you will be a blessing. Not only will you be blessed, Abram, but you and your line will be a blessing. Obviously referring to the coming of Christ, but also that the Jewish line and then the Christians thereafter are going to be priests unto the world. They're going to be the ones that are going to be trying to tell the world of God's true message. And we'll see throughout all these other civilizations, they're worshiping false gods, either gods that don't exist or these fallen angel entities. That's why all these pantheons of ancient religions are the same basic people under different names. They're all fallen angels that they're worshiping. And the only one who's bringing the real message that these aren't gods, that there's only one God and these are false gods, are going to be this line of Abraham who are carrying out this blessing. And you'll be blessed as well. So basically, being blessed and being a blessing are one and the same. If you're blessed, you will be a blessing to your neighbors and those around you. If you're a blessing, you will be blessed. It goes one and the same. You can't be blessed without causing good to come to those around you as well, and being a good person to your fellow man. You can't be a good person to your fellow man and take care of your community and your family without also being blessed. So if you're a blessing, you'll be blessed. If you're blessed, you will be a blessing. They'll go one and the same. One does not come without the other. Verse 3. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. So, like I mentioned earlier, it's basically the same thing all over again. It's going to be, Abe's line is going to be blessed. This obviously comes to fruition through Christ and the message of salvation. So one more time, and I will bless them that bless thee, and curse them that curseth thee, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. So because of Christ, who comes to save the Jews and the Gentiles, everybody all families of the earth will be blessed from Abraham's line, which we know eventually leads to Jesus. Verse 4. So Abram, remember it's not Abraham yet, it's Abram, departed as the Lord had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. So he's still living. They're still living longer lives, but like I mentioned in the earlier ones, you can see that they progressively live shorter and shorter lives after Noah, until ultimately they start living the average lifespan, or the appropriate lifespan, of 120 years, as it says in Genesis 6. So basically, also from this we can get Terah ends up living another 65 years with his son Abraham. Also notice that it mentions that Lot went with him. Lot is seen as a patriarch, even though he's the nephew of Abraham, so he's not in Abraham's line, but he does get tied back into the lineage eventually through his descendants, and they say this is to honor Lot and his faithfulness, and we'll see that later on. But just remember, Lot is also very blessed as well. Because of his faith, God allows his bloodline to become Christ. Now, bloodlines are important and they aren't at the same time. They're important because they fulfill prophecy and it shows how accurate God is. But they're not important in the sense that a lot of people will make you think that the bloodlines are important because of the bloodline. It's not important because of the bloodline. It's important because it fulfills prophecy, knowing the bloodline is the bloodline that is predicted. So it's not the actual DNA of that bloodline that's important necessarily. It's that bloodline fulfills the prophecy. Because if you didn't say which family it's coming from, it wouldn't be a very accurate prophecy, you know? Alright, moving on. Oh, and by the way, remember, Abram has a whole caravan with him. Like, that's the thing I mentioned in my last one, and it goes into greater detail in Jasher and Jubilee and a lot of these non-canonical books, but basically, it says earlier that Abram took souls with him out, all the souls they'd taken. He was converting people in the land of Haran, and that's kind of why he was forced to leave, and what God told him to leave, kind of to save him also. But he was preaching this message that he had learned either through revelation or, as many non-canonical books state, through going and living with his grandfather and great-grandfather and all that, Shem and Noah. Because Shem and Noah are still alive at this time. And Abram actually goes and learns from them. So he comes back to this land of Haran, his land of his father, starts preaching this message of the one true God, and he saves souls, just like Christ does later on. Alright, now verse 5. And that's how he developed his caravan and a large group of people that goes with him. His thing, he can't just walk through the lands that he's about to walk through without a group of people, without a caravan, kind of to help protect him. And we'll see that later on in the Bible, like when he uses strategy and his servants to go save Lot and everything. You know, there's people with him, and he doesn't have children at this time. These are people that he's introduced the word of God to. Verse 5. And Abram took Sarah his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their substance that they had gathered, so all the riches or cattle or sheep and possessions that they had gathered, or gained, whatever you want to say, and here it is, and the souls that they had gotten in Haran. And they went forth to go into the land of Canaan, and into the land of Canaan they came. So leave the land of Haran and go into the land of Canaan. Remember, the Canaanites, who is the youngest son of Ham, this is the cursed line that we talked about earlier. Because of whatever that had to do with seeing Noah's nakedness, Canaan, not even Ham, Canaan is cursed. Not the line of Ham, just the line of Canaan is a cursed line. And again, it says here, and the souls that they had gotten in Haran. Now, the people of Christ's time and before, these Hebrews already knew, they studied the books of Jasher and Jubilees and of the 12 patriarchs and all this. So this is already common knowledge of what happened, how Abraham was preaching the word of God as taught to him by Shem and Noah in the land of Haran, and he was saving souls doing so. So that's why it says right here, and the souls they had gotten in Haran. It doesn't say just the people that started following. They had gotten souls to their cause, to the faith. All right. All right. Moving on now. I believe I already went over this a lot of stuff as far as Abraham and his father's household. So I'm not going to redo that. If you want to watch more about that, I go into a bit more detail than the Bible. Again, I do this a lot, and as I always say, hold Christ as your linchpin of faith. Christ is the message. Everything else is side noise and interesting to talk about. And one of those interesting things are the non-canonical books that explain a lot more detail of the Bible. Now, the first thing to remember if you're ever going to look into the non-canonical books is to know your scripture first, because everything has to be referenced back to the scripture. And then I would even say only read the ones that are referenced in the Bible. And there's a lot of great stuff that's not in the Bible, but you always have to take it back to how it lines up with the Bible, because some of them, the reason why it's not in is because it's questionable whether or not they were changed over time. It's not that they weren't once well-known books by the Hebrews and studied by Christ himself. It's that we can't verify that this is the original translation a lot of times. So anytime you read one of these, make sure you're taking it back to whether or not it lines up with the Bible. But they do go in, especially the book of Jasher, as far as what we're talking about now, goes into much more detail about Abraham's life. And it doesn't change anything from the Bible. It just adds more details to a lot of these things that is just kind of brushed through quickly by Moses or whoever wrote Genesis, most likely Moses, because this is just a history. And then, of course, you can go into deeper detail of each one of these things. But a lot of it just wasn't shared because of the fact that they assumed everybody already knew this stuff. All right, moving on now. So we are on verse 6. And Abram passed through the land unto the place of Sichem, unto the plain of Morah, and the Canaanite was then in the land. So whatever descendants of Canaan means, are they the Nephilim reborn somehow or come back? Maybe, probably. I mean, Canaanites are the Phoenicians, and every ancient civilization talks about the Phoenicians being great warriors, mighty men, very tall, great masons and sailors, but especially the very tall part. And even on like the island of Sardinia, I think, where they found like pillars that talk about how the usurper Joshua had driven them out of their native land. This is the Canaanites, the Phoenicians, and they found, all kinds of tombs there of really, really like freakishly tall men, tons of them. And the Greeks talked about these Phoenicians and on this island and how mighty and tall and huge they were. So something's going on with Canaan's line. Obviously, they're the line that's cursed, and these are his descendants that are in the Holy Land that Abraham is being promised by God. So some reason these Canaanites who are cursed went into this land. Most likely they knew because they were cursed. And when you're cursed, when you're a seed of the serpent, whatever you want to call it, you've given into sin. You've given utterly into living a life of sin. And perhaps this changes your DNA somehow. There's theories behind that. And whatever is happening to the line of Canaan, they have given themselves utterly and completely into sin and worship of sinfulness and self-desire and all kinds of things of immoral taste. And they're occupying the Holy Land, most likely because somewhere along the line, the devil himself has put them there so that they can try and block, and we'll see this throughout the Old Testament, the coming of Christ. Now, obviously, they can't and they won't, but this is their intent. This is why they're always occupying the Holy Land, because they know this is where Abraham's going to go, this is where Christ is going to be born, and they want to prevent that from happening. Verse 7, And the Lord appeared unto Abram, and said, Unto thy seed will I give this land. And there builded he an altar unto the Lord, who appeared unto him. So that was 7. So this is really God's first promise to Abraham. This will be your land. He talks about earlier, like I said, you will be a blessing. And this is where he's promising him the land. And so he builds him an altar to honor God. Notice he doesn't build like an idol. He doesn't build some image. He builds an altar of worship. It's basically somewhere that they can sacrifice animals or, pray or give homage to God. And this also honors God, but it leaves a lasting memory. Just like a sculpture of Zeus is going to leave lasting memory to Greeks and their mythology and their religion. This altar is going to be something that will... Whose altar is that? Abraham's. Oh, the God of Abraham, the God of the Hebrews. So it leaves a lasting memory to be called onto. So what does called unto the name of the Lord mean here? No, I'm sure, but we'll get into that. Verse 8. And he removed from thence, this is Abram, and he removed from thence unto a mountain on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent, having Bethel on the west and Hai on the east. And there he builded an altar unto the Lord, and called upon the name of the Lord. And Abram journeyed, going on still toward the south. So called upon the name of the Lord. I'm not entirely sure what that means. And I've looked into it. I didn't just read this and start talking. And there's tons of theories, but none of them were extremely convincing. And then again, this is just interesting stuff to talk about. It doesn't utterly important to know exactly what that means, but it's very interesting, and there's no reason not trying to figure it out. So call upon the name of the Lord. Does that mean he prayed? Does that mean he worshipped? Does that mean that he spoke with God? It's not entirely clear what call upon the name of the Lord. I think more likely it's just that he prayed there. He called for God to help him in his journeys. But it may be more to it than that, and I'll do more study, and hopefully whoever watches this will as well. Moving on to verse 10. So this is where Abram goes to Egypt. And this is going to be a continual theme throughout the Bible, and we'll get into that here in a second. But just remember, verse 10. And there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down into Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was grievous in the land. So right away he goes to this holy land, goes where he's supposed to, and God's making his promises, but immediately there's a famine. But it doesn't deter his faith in God. He goes to Egypt to escape from the famine. Now, why would God send him there if there's going to be a famine that would immediately cause him to have to go into Egypt? Now, this is a theme throughout the Bible, and I think it just shows God's utter intelligence and our need to have faith in his plan. God knows not only are the Israelites will be a great civilization, and they will be known because they survived throughout history, but if we only had the Israelites that were telling these stories and were only them to verify things, it'd be very easy to argue the Bible. What makes it difficult to argue the Bible are all these other great civilizations with written history and knowledge and recorded records of events and civilization that archaeologists respect as far as what they wrote down, such as Egypt, such as Persia and Babylonia, and Greeks in later times. But at this time, Egypt was one of the main, if not the main, civilization of the day. So in order to verify this story of Noah, he starts in Haran under Nimrod in the Mesopotamian area, which is a known area. So there is record of this stuff with them. He then goes to Egypt, another civilization. So there's more record of these things happening. God knows these civilizations will be used, even though they're polytheistic and worshiping the wrong God and heathenistic societies, they will be a powerful society throughout history. And God uses that to the advantage of verifying the message, in that they will keep recorded history of what happens. And since they're a powerful civilization, I can use that, I being God in that case, to verify the story of the Bible. So that's why, that's why he sent to Egypt here. This is why Egypt is used, why Persia is used, why Babylonia is used, why the Assyrians are used, why the Romans and Greeks. Because these civilizations, though they do not follow Christ or God, they are powerful civilizations. And they can verify the historical aspects of the Bible. And God knew this and uses it to his advantage. It gives credence to the Bible, basically. So verse 11. And it came to pass, when he was come near to enter into Egypt, that he said unto Sarah his wife, Behold now, I know that thou art a fair woman. I love the subtlety of the Bible, to look upon. Therefore it shall come to pass, when the Egyptians shall see, that they shall say, This is his wife, and they will kill me, but they will save thee alive. Okay. We need to understand something about these ancient civilizations. They didn't have the same virtues or values as, say, we have. Even if you're not a Christian, most people have some Christian values, whether or not they realize it or not. The fact of the matter is, at this day and age, this is the day of Sodom and Gomorrah. These cities hadn't been destroyed yet. Sexual depravity reigned supreme. First thing to understand here is Sarah's freaking hot. All right, she's a hottie. This is Helen of Troy. She's a gorgeous woman. Fair woman. She's smoking hot. Okay, Abraham got himself a fine young filly, and he is basically saying that, hey, when we go in here, you have to tell them that I'm your brother. Otherwise, they'll kill me if they know I'm your husband, so that they can have sex with you. I guess they do have their own sense of morals, that they're not going to have sex with someone's wife while he's alive, but they'll gladly and not think twice about killing him. And this shouldn't come as a surprise. Like I said, these are the same type of things we see in Sodom and Gomorrah. Look what happens when the angels visit Sodom later on, and immediately people want to have sex with them. The people want, let us have sex. Send them out here so we can have sex with them, is basically what they're saying. And the same is true here. And Abraham is aware of this. He is wise enough to see that, hey, they're going to kill me to have sex with you, because of the fact that this is their society. Sexual depravity reigns supreme. I mentioned earlier, these civilizations worship false gods, the fallen gods. Now in Genesis 6, it talks about these fallen gods that these other civilizations worship are false gods, are fallen angels that came down here and mated with mortal women to create mighty men of old. And this is every ancient civilization talks about gods coming down, seducing mortal women, and having demigods. This is how Hercules came about. This is Perseus in Greek mythology. And every other ancient civilization has this idea that gods came down and had sex with mortal women and created these gods here on earth. The Bible calls them mighty men of old. Well, whether or not you believe that or not, the fact of the matter is these people believed it, only they believed those were their gods. So whether or not you believe it happened is irrelevant. They believed it happened. The Egyptians believed it happened with their pantheon. And they saw that their gods, who they worshipped and tried to follow, came down and basically raped women. So what's immoral about killing a man and raping his wife? Nothing's immoral about that. That's what the gods did. If the gods did it, we're basically honoring the gods to live a sexually depraved life and have sex with whoever we want and kill a man and have sex with his wife. I mean, the gods basically did this thing. Now again, you don't have to believe that this actually happened. What you need to believe and understand is the ancient Egyptians, believed this. They did believe this. So to them, it was almost virtuous to have sex with a beautiful woman, even if she had a husband. Kill the husband, have sex with her. She's hot. That's what the gods did. They had sex with hot women. So if you want to live a godly life, have sex with hot women, whether or not they want you to or not. That's irrelevant. What's godly is to have sex with them. Do you see? I know it's hard to understand, because even if you're not a Christian, that goes against modern civilization values, goes against Christian values. But that was not the values they had, because they had different gods, which led to different morals. All right, This also gets into, well, here, let's move on. That was verses 11 through 12. Let's read verse 13 real quick here. So this is Abraham talking to his wife Sarah. Say, I pray thee, thou art my sister, that it may be well with me for thy sake, and that my soul shall live because of thee. Liar, 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 pants on fire, old Abe. Honest Abe, I think not. Now, this goes into something that I not struggle with, but it's just an interesting topic. Is it okay to lie? No. But Abraham's telling his wife to lie here. Let's think about this deeply, though. What does this show us? Okay? First off, all men are sinners, so we know that even Abraham wasn't perfect, and lying is wrong. But what is he showing? He's showing shrewdness, cunning, and the ability to see and not be naive to evil and evil ways. Again, I'm not going to sit here and condone lying. I will not sit here and say that it's okay to lie. But Abraham is telling his wife to lie. The message here, I think, is not to be naive to evil. Not to be so caught up in piety and purity to not see that evil exists and that evil will reign if we allow it to. And so, like, I just went off about the Egyptians and their society and what they saw as virtuous, and clearly it's not virtuous. Clearly it's evil to just kill a person and have sex with his wife, which Abram was able to see that that's what was going to happen. And he was able to see it because that's their society. It wasn't like he was super intelligent. He was just able to see it because it's right in front of him. He can see that that's what they would do. A lot of people just would have allowed them to have sex with their wife in order to live. Now, him being a godly man, he wouldn't have done that. So, again, it's not okay to lie, but there's evil in this world. And there's evil you need to be aware of and not be naive to. I have a sermon that I do, and it's about the innocence of Eve. Now, she's not innocent in the sense that she's sinless, but she's innocent in her naivete to the deception of evil, of the serpent, and how he's trying to deceive her. He's trying to trick her. He's trying to do bad and evil, but she's too naive to see it. Now, Abraham could have been naive and just said, oh, it'll be fine. More than likely, I think he was visited and told to say this by an angel, and there's some reference to back this up in non-canonical books. Now, is that just to lie? Again, I struggle with that a little bit. I don't believe it's okay to lie, but I do think that there are many circumstances where you're dealing with such evil that you don't want to show all your cards, if that's the right way of putting it. You don't want the enemy to necessarily know exactly what you're going to do. And also, I think that Abraham trusted that God would protect him and his wife, but he also knew that he had to be smart about it. Now, again, this is just a simple man, all right? I'm not an expert. I do plenty of study and reading and research, but as far as figuring it out, who knows? But I do know that it shows shrewdness, cunning, and a lack of naivete to evil, an awareness of evil. Again, I can't sit here and say that lying is okay, but clearly it shows us that we need to be aware of evil and not just be naive to the evils of the world. I think that's what's really being said right here. Verse 14, and it came to pass that when Abram was come into Egypt, the Egyptians beheld the woman, that she was very fair. So, like I said earlier, Sarah's super hot. Like, she's super sexy, Helena Troy hot. Remember Genesis 6. Again, these deities are lusting after fair women. These are the deities that the Egyptians worshipped. So to lust after fair women, whether or not they want it or not, is godly in the eyes of the Egyptians at this time. And Abram is aware of this. Verse 15, the princes also of Pharaoh saw her and commended her before Pharaoh. And the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. Verse 15, So she's so hot, even Pharaoh wanted her, basically. Like, can you imagine all the princes are like, oh, dude, you gotta check this chick out. Oh, you gotta, come here, you gotta check this chick out. Check her out, check her out, check her out. Like, that's basically what's going on here. Verse 16. And he entreated Abram well for sake. All right. And he entreated Abram well for her sake. And he had sheep and oxen, and he asses, and men servants and maidservants, and she asses and camels. So Abraham is being treated well because he's the brother, as far as the Egyptians know, of Sarah, the super hot chick. So they're trying to win him over, so that they can win her over, sort of thing. And, well, it's not so much win her over, it's just so much like, hey, you got a hot girl, so let's treat her brother nice, because we want this hot chick to be, like, totally into us. Now, it says right here he had oxen and sheep and maidservants and manservants and all this stuff. But it says it right after it says how he was entreated well. Some people take that to say that he was given by Pharaoh these things. That's possible, but it doesn't read that way to me. So look at it one more time. And he entreated Abram well for her sake. And he had. Now he could be Pharaoh, but I think it's Abram here. And he had sheep and oxen and he asses and men servants and maidservants and she asses and camels. I think more than likely what's being said here is that by entreating him well, it didn't mean that he was given these things. Remember, it said earlier in the same chapter how he gathered, all of his possessions and gatherings and everything they had collected, all their substances and the souls that they had gathered in Haran, and took them out of their land. Abraham has a whole caravan, a whole basically village that follows him around. So these are his things. By saying that he was entreated well, basically what they're saying is Pharaoh didn't take these things from him. That's how he's treating him well. He didn't, come into Egypt and I now have possession of all your things, but you won't starve. No, he's more like, all right, you can come in and I won't steal your things from you. So people who think that it was Pharaoh giving him these things, maybe, but it doesn't really read that way. It reads more like he had these things. And Pharaoh treated him well. And how did he treat him well? By not taking them away from him. Like, that's treating him well in the standards of the Egyptians and in their religion. He's not necessarily being given these things. Again, more than likely, he had these things. And the way Pharaoh treated him well was by not taking them from him and enslaving his men servants and maidservants, which likely could have happened. So verse 17, and the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarah, Abram's wife. All right. There's other books, as I mentioned earlier, that have far more details about these things. But one of the translations basically is how he's cursed. Here, let's read that again. And the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarah, Abram's wife. One of those great plagues, according to some writings, is that not Pharaoh and his whole household couldn't perform. They had ED issues, a little erectile dysfunction going on. That's literally one of the translations, is they couldn't perform, and that's how Sarah was safe from being defiled, is literally God made it so they were unable to get hard. I mean, like I said, the Bible's way more subtle about it, and even the non-canonical writings are subtle, but they go into more detail. And that's one of the curses, one of the plagues. But also, a lot of the plagues coincide and are similar, if not the exact same thing in some instances, as the plagues that Moses brings about later on. And again, this is Egypt. Moses does the same thing in Egypt. And one of the ways the Egyptians are able to know what's going on when it comes to Moses is that it's already happened. It happened with Abraham. They'd already seen the power of this God. Now, and when Moses came, they're seeing it even more full. There were even greater plagues happening than the first time around. So these plagues in and of themselves scare the Egyptians and scare Pharaoh a little bit. When Moses comes, it scares them even more. Puts the fear in God right back into them. But they're able to recognize that it's the God of the Hebrews, and this God really is powerful, because it had already happened before. Now, by the time Moses comes along, maybe the pharaohs had ignored it. And, that's legend. It's not a real. That didn't actually happen when Abraham came here with his wife Sarah, and those plagues happened. That didn't actually happen. But when Moses came back and those same plagues were reintroduced, they were like, okay, this is real. The God, and this goes back to what I said earlier about these other civilizations giving credence to the Hebrew Bible and the Hebrew God. God uses them multiple times to give credence to his message and validity to his message. It's very important how this happens. All right. Like the Bible says, there's nothing new under the sun. The same things keep happening again and again and again. It's kind of like perpetual prophecy. Prophecies, a lot of them are perpetual. They don't stop. Like the prophecy of Samuel when the Israelites ask for a king, and he tells them what a king will do to them. But he'll give them one, but this is what they'll do. They'll take your sons to fight in wars, and they'll take your taxes and make your daughters do this and that. That's perpetual. It doesn't stop. Governments always, power structures are always going to do this. It's not like just a one-time thing that only Saul is going to do this and no other king afterwards. And the same thing here. Nothing new under the sun. The plagues came back again with Moses, and they knew that it was the Hebrew God. All right, verse 18. And Pharaoh called Abram and said, "What is this that thou hast done unto me? I can't get a boner." Hey, who knows if that's what happened, but that's what happened. That's why Sarah wasn't banged. He wasn't able to get a boner. I love how he's like, the Pharaoh's like, "Why didn't you say so?" It's kind of like, yeah, right, as if, man. If I said so, you would have killed me. No, I wouldn't have. Why didn't you tell me? 'Cause you kill people and have sex with their wives if you think they're hot. That's why, obviously. Well, still no excuse. Alright, verse 19. Why saidst thou, she is my sister, so I might have taken her to me to wife? Now therefore, behold thy wife, take her and go thy way. And Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him away, and his wife, and all that he had. So he was sent away, not killed. He could have just, why didn't Pharaoh just kill them all? Because he was cursed. He couldn't get a boner. And there's all these plagues happening. They could see, they knew, they weren't that dumb. Like, even though they worshipped other gods, even these ancient peoples were aware of the God of Noah, of Abraham. They just didn't want to follow that God, because that God called for, saying no to earthly pleasures. Whereas the false pantheon of gods said yes to earthly pleasures. So yeah, they're like, I want the one who says yes to earthly pleasures. So they're aware of this real God. They're aware of Yahweh. They're aware of it. They just don't want to follow him. And when these curses happen, they can tell it's because Abram is a man of God, and this is his wife. And instead of killing him, which would have caused any, first off, they couldn't have because God wouldn't allow it. But they were plagued. They knew that the only way to get rid of these plagues was to, give Sarah back to Abram, and they also didn't want anything to do with them because he brought plagues upon them. Get out of here. Go. But notice he wasn't killed. He was just sent away. It was just almost a brief, kind of like, what was the point? Why did God even send them to Egypt there? What was the whole point of that? I mean, I understand getting away from the famine, but why did God cause a famine? And again, it goes back to what I said earlier. First of all, it's bringing these plagues early on so that they will be recognized and know that it's the Hebrew God when the plagues come again under Moses. But second of all, it's God using these other civilizations in the world to verify and to use outside, call it secular, unbiased opinion or peoples to record the same history as the Bible, verifying the Bible. And that's what God's doing throughout history. He's using the Egyptians here. He'll use the Egyptians again many times. Use the Persians and the Assyrians and the Greeks and the Romans and the Babylonians, all these other civilizations that will be used by God to verify the message of the Bible, to give credence to it by giving non-believers the message, by having them write down the history that coincides with the Hebrew Bible. So you're not just getting it from the Hebrews, because again, people will be like, that's bias, it's theirs. No, you're getting it from multiple civilizations, because God uses everyone. He uses all the civilizations to get his message across. Even if they don't follow his message, he still will use them. Simple as that. All right, God bless. I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Obviously, we'll get into Genesis 13 next time. Have a wonderful good afternoon, good evening, or good morning if that's the time.